Hi guys, it's Debbie, and today I would like to speak about Skins, a British TV series which aired for the first time back in 2007 and continued until 2013. Skins follows the story of a group of teenage friends from Bristol. It explores their lives at home, at school, it follows them while they're out and about together, and in particular analyses important social issues they go through. So for example, sexual and racial discrimination, eating disorders, dealing with grief, substance abuse, living in a dysfunctional family, and so on. The series is split into what are called generations, so different groups of friends but from more or less the same background. So we have the first generation, which covers seasons 1 and 2, then the second generation for seasons 3 and 4, and then the third generations for the 5th and 6th seasons, and then there is a special 7th season which is a sort of where are they now for some of the characters from the previous seasons. Skins was highly successful when it was released back in 2007. I was a huge fan of it and I am still a fan of part of it now, but over the course of the seasons it lost a huge slice of its fame and its followers. So what went wrong? I would like to share with you what, in my personal opinions, were some of the first season's main strengths and what could have been improved in the last seasons. Now, when Skins first aired, it aimed and appealed to a generation of young teenagers which were interested in seeing their peers acting more rebelliously, even if then what they saw didn't realistically reflect the normal average teenage life. It was aimed at growing teens, but with more bold, daring topics such as sex, drugs, partying, but at the same time with a deep concern and understanding of these kids' issues and desires, which are often treated superficially and in a nearly comedic manner by the majority of teen shows. It was the first rebellious and fast-selling approach teens had to the adult world, but still without being directly targeted to a more grown-up audience. The show was emblematic of that critical time in adolescence in which people are torn between wanting to be rebellious, go to parties and make a substance-fueled scene, but then learning the consequences of certain rush decisions. And the first two generations, so seasons 1 to 4, mirrored this at best. Obviously, being a product made to entertain for years to come, the characters' behaviour and adventures tended to be exaggerated. The substance abuse was often pushed to the limit, and the plot was regularly borderline impractical. But the main concept, the main goal, was that of not portraying the unrealistically mainly jolly Disney Channel youth whose main concern is passing a test or being noticed by a crush. With Skins, the main goal was that of portraying real concerns teenagers had. For example, discrimination, bullying, being pressured into doing certain things, dealing with a sudden loss. And it portrayed the various ways a teenager would deal with these issues without a strong adult guidance. So eating disorders, substance abuse, dangerous sexual relationships, violence, and so on. The first generation was the most emblematic of this scene, with characters such as Chris, abandoned by his family, lost in an empty world he would fill and numb out with countless pills, or Cassie, ignored and bullied, constantly harming her body by the temptation of anorexia. We met awkward Sid, silent and always hidden in the shadow of showstopper Tony, and talented Jal, which didn't feel at home in her own house, mysterious Effie, already living in an adult world, and so many others. All the characters were well developed, we found ourselves deeply bonding with them, and some of the actors actually went on to become famous figures in the cinema industry. There's Kaya Scodelario, which we recently saw in Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, Oscar nominee Dev Patel, Daniel Kaluuya from Get Out, along with a series of already well-known actors which portrayed the teens' parents, for example Peter Capaldi. The second generation still stuck to the series' original goal and mood, with characters such as shy and outcast JJ, whose confidence progressively improves over the course of the episodes, laid back and quiet Freddie, violent James Cook, whose main goal during adolescence seems to be of just getting wasted as much as possible, engaging in unprotected sex and constantly getting into trouble. So the second generation still maintained most of the original atmosphere, but with even more exaggerated scenes, unlikely dialogues, and unreasonable love triangles, we could already feel the downfall towards the last seasons. We were starting to lose the bond we had with the characters, we were getting bored of their spoilt antics. We wanted a deeper character development and not just a line of cocaine and a rave in every other scene. The audience had been grown over the years and wanted the characters to grow along with them, to become wiser, to cover deeper topics. But the plot just insisted on repeating the same scheme in every episode. The first sign of fracture was that with the first generation, everybody tended to agree that the kids were usually wrong. There was no doubt about their recklessness. They would get into trouble but always learn their lesson and move on to a more mature way of thinking. And the adults were a fixed presence, as after all we are speaking of young teens, and they would never judge the kids' behaviour, but reflect upon why certain attitudes had developed, what the underlying causes could be. But with the second generation, the characters' reckless behaviour appears nearly always as justified. Anything can happen or be said without a fraction of time for reflection, without a personal improvement if not necessary for the plot. If you know you're developing a plot in which the characters will soon change with the next seasons, and you know you will have no more space for their analysis, why not focus on getting the best out of the limited time? So already by season 4, the scenario was slipping towards unrealistic plot twists and an extremely limited character analysis. But then the third generation stepped in and we completely lost any faith in the series. The last seasons of Skins were completely lost in characters we couldn't relate to. They were two-dimensional and boring, giving us no incentive to remain glued to the screen. There was space for potential, but nobody seized the opportunity. Minnie was the beautiful and confident queen bee, but which in reality hid a secret facade of lack of body confidence and eating disorders. But her screen time was limited to her insulting other characters, having various relationships with them, with barely a couple of touching moments. Frankie was introduced as the interesting, mysterious, shy outsider, which hides a creative mind and bright personality, but which ended up shouting and crying her way through the episodes, with not a meaningful moment which lasted for more than 5 minutes. Nick stares into nothing, Aloe drinks and watches porn. Grace fails at being the unconventional adaptation of a posh girl. Matty and Liv are characters on the show. The targeted audience, which loved the series at first, was now at least 5 to 6 years older and wanted something deeper. And also the rest of the general audience of new viewers wanted an interesting analysis of the social issues, but had to watch childish characters laughing about porn, hiding from their parents, getting drunk at every occasion and reciting old and predictable lines. The characters' adventures included unlikely encounters with Russian gangsters and destroying properties and shrugging off the matter as something of scarce importance. To prove the way the series could have developed and improved over the course of the seasons, let's analyse another series which introduces a dysfunctional group of close-knit people which deal with social issues on a daily basis over an equal period of 7 seasons. Shameless. Shameless appeals to all audiences, adults and teens, long-time fans and new viewers, because it covers a range of evergreen topics just like the first seasons of Skins, and its characters develop over the course of time. Kids grow up, adults get married, they divorce, love stories begin and end, families are united or torn apart, financial stability is a desperate utopia. In general, it keeps the story going over a long period of time, and even with its flaws and ups and downs, it still remained consistent and engaging over the years. The 7th season of Skins, so like let's say the special episodes about some of the previous characters, proved that some of the actors had the potential, and that maybe the best choice would have been of following fewer characters over a longer period of time. As a matter of fact, we meet Effie, Cook, Naomi, Emily, Cassie many years later, now dealing with the responsibilities and difficulties adulthood involves. But after such a long gap, a large part of the audience had abandoned the show. Obviously, the creators of Skins had made an uncommon choice, and that was of changing the characters every 2 seasons. A choice which made the show stand out against many other similar ones. So the outcome would have probably anyway been different from the one of Shameless, which follows the same characters over a long period of time. But as I was saying before, even within this choice, why ignore the character development in a limited period of time? Why hide behind childish plot twists when there was the potential for development? Why fill out the blanks in the plot with gallons of alcohol and impractical raves? So because of all the above mentioned reasons, I couldn't recommend Skins as a good complete series to enjoy from beginning to end. What I could suggest instead is watching the first 2 to 4 seasons, which contain most of the original spirit, without wasting time on the last part of the series. An addition you could make is then jump into the 7th season and catching up with some of the older characters. Let me know what you loved or hated most about Skins. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to subscribe for many more videos. See you soon. Bye.